day, everyone. Welcome back to Cohesia Connect, Connecting Conversations. And I am really pleased to welcome you back to another podcast where we have an exciting guest with us today, and actually a returning guest, shall I say, one of our alumni from when we first started this on Instagram Live. If you know from our outro, you would see that we've had chats from months ago, like almost, I think it was last year when we used to host them on Instagram Live. And my lovely Milka was one of the first people to join us on that platform. But we are very pleased to welcome her back and for her to share her story, what she's been up to, what's life been like, and give us a little bit of an overview of how's life been within the D&I space. So without further ado, I will let Milka introduce herself. Tell us a little bit about you, what you've been up to. Some of our guests probably, or audience, shall I say, would have not seen or heard from you. So give them a little bit of juice.
Okay. Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to be here. I'm a freelancer, just so kind of my background has been mostly freelance, practitioner level, working therapeutically with lots of different types of people in different spaces. So I've worked with lots of young people, adults in different spaces, such as prisons, police stations, and also gender-based violence. I was also an IDVA, so I was working with people that have experienced domestic violence, sexual violence. My background has been mainly practitioner, really working with people that have experienced trauma. And the last 5 years, I've been a freelancer, so I've been a consultant. I have been working with teams, organizations, to support teams and organizations around their leadership, their kind of staff recruitment, also supporting them around their participation if they're youth organizations working with young people, a whole host of different things, but mainly freelance consulting, developing and delivering programs as well. And then most recently, also within that time, evaluation research, but also from a anti-oppressive lens, really thinking about what anti-oppressive evaluation looks like, and EDI in the kind of the, is in the way that everyone knows it, equity, diversity, inclusion, which we are, we've done the work, but we're just about to brand and launch, which is exciting. It's called Culture, yes. I'm excited to be here, and I'm in a good grounded space. I'm in America right now, so midday.
Hopefully we can get some American audience listening.
Yeah, maybe the algorithm, you never know. Honestly, maybe there is going to be some.
Love it. Well, thank you for that introduction. And so, yes, you would have seen Milka around, like I said, on our Instagram Live last year, and she has a whole wealth of knowledge from the youth sector, but also within the D&I space. And we hope that we will give you some insight, have a authentic conversation around what does the D&I space look like, experience our own experience within that space, some of the challenges being in the space, and potentially look at the hopes and futures of where we can see this go. So I hope you stick in, tune in, listen, grab your tea and biscuits or whatever you need, because this is going to be quite a rich conversation, if I do say so myself. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I do have a question, just a random icebreaker question.
Okay.
So the question is, what are you clear about now that you weren't clear about perhaps 1 year ago?
Ooh, okay. I guess what I'm clear about now definitely is I'm thinking more about legacy. I'm thinking more about family. I'm thinking more about myself in terms of, really radical rest, radical self-care, and community care, and all of those things that are, I guess, maybe I know I say this a lot, so I'm kind of like, I need to be mindful of, you have to practice what you preach. And I think slowing down is something that I've really done. I've moved away from direct practitioner work at the moment. Still make, still I'm offering, I'm also delivering training at the moment for mentors that are going into to be mentors with young people. So I'm still making impact in a different way, but I'm not doing direct frontline or practitioner work as I was. So I think, yeah, for me, just kind of my own personal reflections. My grandma passed away this year, so it's been really, really difficult. But also, I'm reflecting around all her strengths, all the things that she did to, the kind of intergenerational impact that she's had, and all those qualities that I've seen in her in terms of, yeah, just family and the kind of the matriarchy of the kind of root of the whole family.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about myself and actually what that looks like for myself going forward. How do I keep her legacy alive? What does that look like, feel like? And also some learnings, maybe some things that I would do differently in my life. So yeah, I'm really in a good place, reflect and think about my own well-being, my own kind of legacy as well, and impact. Like, how do we make impact in this time that we're here?
Yeah, no, that is so well said. And I think, our audience will all be sending our condolences for your bereavement. It's always hard losing a family member, but what reassures us is that we can, like you said, we can carry on that legacy because we haven't experienced that before. We don't know what impact that it can have. And fortunately for you in this case, from what I'm hearing, is that it did have quite a positive impact in a way of getting you to come to a realization of there is more that I can do. There is more where I can let her spirit perhaps live through me, and her strength live through me and take that on. So I'm sure you are making her proud whatever you do. So keep doing what you're doing. You are doing amazing stuff, and we all here at Cohesia Connect are rooting for you. So where to find us.
Goes both ways. I'm rooting for you both.
Love that. It's all about girl power, female empowerment, girl raising girls, women raising women. So that's something that I am wholeheartedly passionate about. And I know even in our private conversations, we do the same for each other. So I love you for that. And which is why you've been invited back. So it's
thank
all
you. Love back, honestly, genuinely.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. And so that was just a little icebreaker to get us started. But if we first tackle, like, what have you, well, I guess, tell us a little bit about your experience in the D&I space, because we hear a lot of the things that, like the projects we do, the initiatives we kind of put together and run and deliver within organizations, whatever that may look like, the strategies that we implement. But what has been your experience on, like, as a person doing that work? Because we hear a lot about what the impact of that work could do or what has been done. But from you delivering that, what has been your experience?
I think for me, without putting the umbrella of, EDI, D&I in the kind of the way that it is in terms of the work, I've been doing this work in every organization I've ever worked in. So I think, seeing things and understanding power and understanding organizations as systems, for me, I've always been reflective around power, around experience, checking in with staff. I've done that just naturally in any space that I've been in. So I guess it's probably like a decade long worth of, investment and work without the pay. So it is, reflecting and, giving feedback around how do we make things equitable for young people in all the spaces. For example, if it's adults, even if it's just team well-being, I've been an advocate for, well-being of staff in all the different spaces. So I think that's kind of been like my kind of, my grounds and the kind of the way that I got to where I am now.
Yeah.
Doing this, I guess, officially within a consulting role, sometimes it's been more of a critical friend. When you're consulting, you're supporting organizations and teams, you're pulled into conversations or kind of strategy meetings or recruitment because they want that kind of they want the lens around actually, is this equitable? Are we being, in terms of the process, have we thought about all the considerations that a candidate may need? So it's been more of it started off quite loose, and then I think now I've in terms of the way that I do the work, there's definitely been more structure. So just in terms of the pivot culture, it's new. We've been doing the work, separately, myself and my business partner Shauna, and we came together to actually create something. So we've been delivering the work. We're just about to do the branding, and all of that takes a lot of time, right? We were saying about actually it takes so much thought and consideration. I've seen a lot of services are offered that are, over promising and organization, and I'm like, in 1 hour, really, or 2 hours? How do you guarantee that? And it's the honest truth. And I think it's and I think maybe there's a sales aspect of the, the language that's used, but also it's being true to ourselves and who we are. And I think not losing ourselves within this kind of sector is so important.
It can become quite commercialized, can't it? So commercialized. I've seen so many of it, and it's just like, where is the authenticity that comes along with it? Where's the truth that comes along with it? Because realistically, when we think of D&I, it's down to the human. For us at Cohesia Connect, this is what we firmly believe, is that it's down to the humanistic level of things, the foundation of it all. How do we interact and engage at that foundational level in order to really change the systems around it? And I think for a lot of it, we do all this training and stuff, and don't get me wrong, education is definitely required. But 1 or 2 a year in an organization isn't going to shift the dial, isn't going to make people think differently. And half the time, people are just going through them because they need to get through it because it's mandatory. And they want to get back to their BAU, their business as usual. So people aren't really engaging with it as we would hope.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also the kind of influx of 2020, there was a global, a movement, a tipping point, however you like to consider that time frame. 3 years on, really, I don't know what has changed. I think there was, again, with any kind of social, with any incidents, critical incidents or social movement, there's a peak and then it drops. So actually, what happens to everybody that made a commitment 2020? What happens now, and how do you just do it from a genuine intention? I think there's a lot of performative action, and this is honestly the case. A lot of it. This is why the data conversation is so important for me. I'm thinking about, how was those surveys conducted? Where did you get that percentage from? How many people were surveyed for you to say this is the percentage of people in the organization, or these are the feelings of belonging in the organization? So if we have, there's so many layers and so many lenses, and I think because my life has been just different, a spectrum of different experiences and different workplaces, I think bringing all of that together is probably what I've tried to do. And in those rooms when we're facilitating conversations and we're facilitating group experience, and I think there's a lot of experiential learning with that happens in those spaces. For the workshops that we've delivered, there was a lot of experiential learning, and there was a lot of holding that we had to do from a psychological safety perspective. Sometimes there isn't all of those skills or lenses in some of the trainings I've attended and as a staff member around certain topics. So I think it's making sure that people are there for the right reasons, number one.
Exactly.
People are not going to do the work properly. Honest truth, right? It's based on lived experience. We're both here, and it's based on intersectionality, and really the word has been hijacked like every other word. It has been hijacked, and we've lost the meaning and the kind of foundation, the roots of what intersectionality was created and the term was coined in the first place. So there is a lot of buzzwords, jargon that's thrown out there without the context or the lens, and actually weaponized. The word equality itself has been weaponized without the people understanding the deeper meaning of what that was there for in the first place. And it's also used to silence Black women.
Yeah. And that's what it was coined for in the first place, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It's
so
crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is, honestly. It's yeah, these are the things that, the honest conversations that we also need to have, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think we need to be more open about these things, because or we'll just hide under a rock and just think,
Yeah.
oh, everything is, going and everything's progressing and all of that. And yes, to an extent there is that, but underneath those layers, and I think even before we came on to record, we were talking about the different layers that it contains, and how do we get deep enough in all of those layers. And that takes time, that takes energy, that takes a movement, a huge movement, to really allow us to get into those different areas. And I think some people are actually scared. I don't want to say scared, maybe a little bit more reserved to look at how D&I has become a weapon in some spaces. People are fearful to admit that, because if once they admit that, it's like, then why are we doing all of this for? But because you went in there with a certain perception and a certain way of doing it that was far removed from the real purpose of it all, we've moved so far beyond to where what it was meant to do. So when you then start weaponize it, and then you start calling it to be a weapon, people then, okay, well, if that's the case, we just won't talk about it. We'll just leave it as it is. And I think sometimes that's the kind of spaces we navigate. And I'm not saying all environments are that, but in some environments, I think there is a real lack of transparency and a real lack of vulnerability when it comes to D&I issues. That if we're not vulnerable enough, we're not actually going to make the change, because someone has to say something, or else, like, we're just going to stay stuck. And if that's what you want to do, and you want to take it off your box and say, actually, we did this, we did that, brilliant, you stay there. But I don't think, like, in 10, 20 years time, that organization will not reach its potential, or that environment will not cater for the diverse world that we are now encompassing. And the future. And that's like Gen Z. They will call you out on every thing. So good luck surviving in the future.
And they also look for workplaces that are, more diverse, actually, even from like a eco-friendly, even fashion, being sustainable. All of these things are part of the actual reasons for.
Kind of like the way I see the Gen Z arena or space or people, me included, is a bit of a revival. That's when I see these blogs and articles talking about the Gen Z community and generation, I most see it as a revival. These are things that have been silenced. Our parents, our parents, our grandparents, so on and so forth. They've been silenced and been buried with all of the things that we can't talk about. Or, even if you do experience racism in work, you still go to work. Now, we are not tolerating that. We are not accepting that as our truth. So for me, it's like an awakening, a revival of, okay, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, that's your business. I'm going to do it anyway.
And I love that. It's knowing when to exit. And I think this is an honest conversation, right? It's knowing when to exit. There's statistics around, I think it's 120,000 people in the UK have left workspaces because of racism. And that's, and 4 out of 5 people didn't report it. Actually, they just left. They've just exited. So actually, you're not capturing the reality of belonging or all conversations, right? You're not really capturing the reasons why people have left. Sometimes it's just too much in that space to report to HR. Nothing gets done. And you're just kind of in this, or actually you do report to HR and actually you're experiencing even more racial trauma. So yeah, I think some of the, and that was a big study. So like, again, thinking back to data and big analysis, that was like, I think 3.5 million or something, or 3.9 million people that was surveyed that are from the global majority. So actually, that's a massive data set.
Wow.
So these are the honest truths and honest conversations without, putting things under the carpet. Let's have an honest conversation. What's really going on in your organization? And also another layer of the D&I conversation is people being, given the D&I role without the power to do the work. It's just part of your job description. And you're like, okay.
You know what? That is such a I have to laugh because I've seen so many people talk about it, like on LinkedIn. I've seen people open up about it. And then I do see it overshadowed with people in the space who be like, oh my God, I'm doing, this work, I'm doing that, and blah, blah, blah. Again, I would hope we can be more honest about the conversations. I know, and I've seen, and I've heard, and I've been in rooms where you're given a role,
Yeah.
and you literally do nothing with that because you're not given the authority or the power to wield the change that's needed to be done. It's either the business way or no way.
Yeah.
And if the business doesn't like it because they don't want to, risk their position or ruin their reputation in the media or whatever it may be, they shy away from it and be like, this is not what we do. So if that's not what you do, then how do you expect change to happen if you're going to continue to do the same thing over and over again?
Yeah. And in the and continues to cause harm. And I think that's the conversation, right? Harm.
Exactly. And people don't look at it like that. People just think, oh, we're not representing this person. We don't have an ERG, so we're not including this things like that. But in fact, there is real harm at the end of it. And for me, the data is great. But I don't want just numbers.
Yeah.
I don't want you to just show me numbers. I want you to show me the quantitative data that comes along with it. And I want to see that the real experiences that are underlining that data, because without that, I think like we're just looking at numbers and think, oh, that's great. But where are the real people behind it? Where are the real stories, the narratives that sit behind that data that really allow us to see a bigger picture in order for us to enact change?
Yeah. And also, I think you're right. The story aspect is so important. I think this is one thing we also have to be mindful of. We're coming from lived experience, and some consultants are not. So actually, what you're bringing is theory and probably some experience on the ground. But when the lived experience part is missing, you're actually missing a lens. You're actually missing you might not understand the kind of impact. I've experienced racial trauma in different spaces and different organizations. That wasn't a nice feeling. I can pinpoint the harm that it caused me in those spaces, but also I can also see why I'm passionate about this work and why I was in the sector in terms of supporting people for a decade, because it's about all the people I was supporting in terms of power didn't have a lot of power. Actually, let's talk about the global majority. We're talking about Black young people that are in prison. We're speaking about people that have no citizenship and no kind of immigration status, ability, like kind of all the layers in sectionality and all the layers of identity, LGBTQ communities. For example, in domestic abuse, my caseload, men as well, was really hard to engage both men and people from the LGBTQ community in regards to domestic abuse. And that's because of all the stigma and all the experiences they face because of the essence of masculinity and what that looks like. All these kind of things that are also barriers for people. So yeah, I think the lived experience part definitely brings in another lens that you can't teach. And I think that's one thing that is not always lived experience in all aspects. I'm an advocate for lived experience of criminal justice system, people that have experienced any kind of lived experience whether it's health system, mental health system, lived experience is also something that needs to be seen as of value, definitely something that should be, in terms of equity, should also be financially rewarded. These are things that are not always considered, and we're just thinking about, professional experience as well. And we have both. So
yeah, but one thing that I would say, there is a line to be drawn, because some organizations would use that lived experience to their advantage.
Yeah.
And further harm that consultant practitioner because they have that lived experience. So they expect you to know everything because you represent a community, when even within the community that they supposedly think that you're a part of have sub-communities, and that community has another sub-community. Again,
monolith. We're not like one group.
Exactly. So sometimes you wonder whether some people get jobs because they represent a certain community and they know, well, actually, this person will be great because they represent X community. And it does make you think, like, was that just performative? Just because I am a part of that, I know how to do X, Y, and Z, or I know how to engage with them. That's not necessarily the case. So I feel like sometimes that lived experience can be used as a weapon as well. But there needs to be
100%. I've seen
there needs to be a balance, between how's that lived experience being used, and we're not going to that person, bombarding, adding more layers and more trauma for that person, because it can be quite traumatic when you're seeing your fellow people, whatever community you're a part of, when you see trauma happening to them, it indirectly impacts you as well. So how do you make sure that you, one, as a consultant practitioner, distance yourself from that, and to avoid senior leadership or organizations or whatever use that as a key for them to unlock certain things when it doesn't sit well with you, it doesn't align with you, it's just adding more mental stress, more mental trauma on you. So for me, lived experience is certainly of value, but we need to find a way for organizations to know where to draw the line.
Oh yeah, definitely. So and the power aspects, I think it comes down again to power and exploitation, and I've seen where this happens a lot in the youth sector and charity sector. You have somebody stand up, but they haven't been part of the a conference or the event. They haven't been part of the planning. They just stood up for 20 minutes and directed to regurgitate their experience, their trauma in that space, and then everybody claps. Oh, such a heartfelt contribution, and they walk away. But there's no holding, there's no kind of support beforehand, after. All of that is exploitation. But I think the lived experience I'm speaking about is from an equitable lens, really thinking about if you're a practitioner, and you don't have to bring your trauma into the room. That's your discretion, right? You decide on what you want to bring into the space. But what you can say is, I have lived experience, and these are the things, and you can pull out things without standing there and all of that is also
to repeat the trauma, or going there with a particular mindset of, I'm gonna attack everyone because this is what they've done.
And so, the expectation that you only have your lived experience to contribute, whereas actually your lived experience could be in the back of your mind, but your strategy is what you're contributing, your kind of approach is what you're contributing.
Skills.
All the skills is you contributing through your lived experience, not necessarily you standing there pouring. We see a lot of trauma porn that happens a lot, Black trauma. So sometimes I'm like, I want to watch a film, and I'm like, oh, I just want to read the story. On the plane, I was doing this on my 10-hour flight. I was like, I want it because there's a American Airlines, there's like a bit that said American movies. I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like reading the kind of the narratives before I played it, and I was like, oh, all of this just like quite heavy. I wanted something light.
Yeah. You're on a 10-hour flight. I don't really want to be in the air dealing with all of this trauma.
Yeah, and it's like I just want to disconnect, you know. I want to listen to something and do something that's a bit more light. And but it's also important to think about like why are things are always commissioned that are around trauma? Well, why are we not speaking about joy? And why, you know, I went to a workshop around peace. We talk a lot about violence, but we don't talk about peace. So yeah, I think it's even in the sector and the D&I space, like we can flip things. I know we sit a lot in the trauma aspect, but actually we can still, you know, speak about the realities because it's important. We're not kumbaya every day and happy roses, but we can also use that space to really think about, you know, let's reimagine what this space could be like.
Yeah.
Without all these issues.
Yeah, and I think that again, there's that balance. You know, you highlight the real issues, the real challenges that we face in society from, you know, all aspects. But then we also talk about, you know, being who we are. Our identity is such a beautiful thing, and this is why we are who we are, because of our own personal identities, cultural heritage, our, you know, ethnic background, whatever it may be. It's all part of a really colorful, beautiful picture that makes us who we are as an individual. And don't get me wrong, I have seen and I have been in spaces where that has been demonstrated. And for me, that's when I think it's best highlighted or best engaged with, because there is not that heavy downpour, but rather it's a bit of both to get people to understand, like, I'm great. My identity is great. And this is why I love who I am.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these are some of the challenges I face because I am who I am. So I think, you know, getting people to really understand it in that way, because no one really wants to sit there and hear a heavy downpour of trauma. Like people disconnect, people don't engage. And for some people, they don't quite understand. So how do we communicate it in a way that they can?
I think it's like coming back to maybe the ways that we've been delivering some of the workshops, like really experiential, like really holding space. Like we thought about music that we would play at certain points. We thought about the room, the space, you know, kind of really thinking about creating and allowing people to reimagine one of those things, reimagine what this space could look like. And sometimes that's really hard. If you're in a space where you're being harmed because because you have a disability, because you're a woman, you're trans, whatever the kind of identity is, if you're being harmed, it's really hard to regulate in that space, especially if you're around the people that are causing the harm and you're all sat there in a workshop, right? So it's just making sure, like, you know, we have check-ins at the end, we have debrief sessions, and also recommendations. One of the things that we did say to one of our clients is we recommend that people that have experienced some of these intersections actually receive additional time for well-being after the workshops, because we did our bit as facilitators, as the consultants coming in. But when we leave those spaces, how do you make sure, you know, what's going on for them? And actually, we had disclosures, which is, you know, it means there was safety created in that space. But within that, it's like, okay, where's the aftercare? And making sure, you know, people commissioning work are also thinking about the after effects. I've been in conversations where, oh my God, it turned my whole day upside down because we decided to have a conversation. I was a staff member in this organization. It was just this thing of like you said, pouring of trauma and sharing. And it was like, how am I then meant to go and work with people to this? Because you're just in your body, right? It's a physical response. Trauma has a response in our body. So yeah, I think really thinking about the long term, no quick fixes, no checkbox. Let's really do the work and let's do it properly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think luckily there is more people, more consultants and people in the D&I space now that are focusing on that aspect, and I'm really pleased to see it. That's not to
Me too.
say that we haven't done, because like I said, this is going to take a movement to really turn all of this on its head. We're dealing with hundreds of years of stigma, of stereotyping, of discrimination. Like that's a lot of undoing that we
Oppression.
need to do.
And it's
Oppression.
current. It's still
Yeah,
here. Yeah, yeah.
it's an undoing. That's what I'm gonna call it. It's the undoing.
Yeah.
And it's going to take, you know, a movement. It's going to take a generation to really allow us to kind of start to overcome that and introduce. And I love the word that you said, and we use it internally at Cohesia Connect, and it's about reimagining
Yeah.
what the space looks like, and getting people to interact with that new imagination, and giving them hope, allowing them to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. All of this is not bad. It may sound bad, but there is hope. And sometimes we just have to enact hope and faith that things will work and things will get better. Well,
Yeah, I
that's
think no, it's true. I think without hope, then in these spaces, really, you know,
yeah,
it's
certainly.
if we don't have, and we have to be realistic. Like I said, I come from, racial justice, social justice, real community heart work is what I call it,
Mhm.
in terms of the last 10 years, right? So for me, it's like, okay, what does a win look like in this organization? What does a
Mhm.
small win? What does a small shift? And what I would probably say, what does a pivot of culture look like in this organization? And for some
Mm.
organizations, you know, it's still a pivot, whatever that is. It could be a change in their recruitment. It could be a change in some of the ways that they engage their
Mhm.
staff. It could be all those changes we still have to celebrate. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we'll just be feeling heavy and defeated all the time. So I think we also have to think about the small pivots and the small aspects of our contribution in these spaces,
Yeah. No,
because this is
100%.
systemic and it's structural, it's layered. So
No, I totally agree. And I think, there are, and I've been a part of pieces of work where it may seem so small, like, is this really going to enact change? Am I really making an impact here? But then I come to the realization, and I'm just like, actually, this is a win. This is one, it's never been done before. One, it's a new space that is new to all of this. So of course I'm going to celebrate, and of course I'm going to shout about it, because it is a small win. It might seem so insignificant for someone next to me or next door, whatever it may be. But for me, it's one step further of that organization showing commitment to the change that they want to see in the future. And I think that for me, those, it said, the small changes leads to a big impact one day. And it takes those little things to become a big thing, many
yeah,
little things to become a big thing. And I think we're in the phase of life where we're building up a collection of those little things.
yeah,
And I am hopeful that the future would look very different to what we know it now. And I'm content to know that things will change. And that may be very optimistic of me, but I don't care. But I think things will change, and while things are changing, we will have new challenges. So we
yeah,
need to be equipped to deal with those new challenges that we will face, because as we know, D&I is an ever evolving journey. It's not you get here and you stop. You will get new things that you're faced with, and you're just like, oh, got to go back to the drawing board now.
that
So
is,
keeping that momentum allows you to be in a better position to deal with those changes and new challenges that arise. But with that being said, I just want to close it off and ask you, we were talking a lot about hopes and what the future holds. What do you think the future will hold? What do you see envisioning? What is your reimagination of D&I?
Honestly, I think within this work, I think for the people that, have lived experience of different intersectionalities and identities, for those people to really, have a plan, have a real radical self-care, radical rest, community care plan, because this work will tap into your experience, will tap into your experience of all the different, oppressions that you might have experienced. For myself, misogynoir, racism, kind of racial trauma I've experienced. So, and being in those spaces where you're continuously witnessing, we were speaking about the trauma aspect, and actually the experiencing of trauma, but also the witnessing of trauma in itself is heavy on the body, it's heavy on the mind, it's heavy on the spirit. So I think it's more of a reminder for us not to burn out the people that are doing the work, from a genuine place, because again, this is another space where it is hard work. You really have to care, because you're still shifting. You're trying to shift power in systems, right? And we're living in the kind of bigger context of where we live in society, and organizations are microcosm of that system. So things that we experience in society are happening, of course, in every organization. And I think organizations not to be in denial that actually this is, spread like the air everywhere. So, and it happens in different ways and different shapes, and it comes up in different, but it exists in different spaces, and it's being mindful of all of those. So I guess my hope for the D&I sector is for it not to be diluted, not to be, not consultants and people that are freelance that are doing the work, not to be silenced, people from the community doing the work, not to be silenced and, pushed aside. And then you've just got like a global big corporation doing the work, which just has very easy, nicely probably written impact reports, but then the actual substance and the depth of the work is not being done. So I'm hoping for, I guess people say radical, but it's not radical. It's the work that needs to be done, right? This is the work. That's my aim. That's my hope for us in the sector, for people that are doing the work, and for equity in terms of finance. We have to be honest and say, even within this space, it's not disconnected from society. That you've got Black and global majority consultants that are not being paid the same as their white counterparts. This is a very standard, conversation about finance, and that in itself is oppression. Not having access to finance and resources. This is also an oppressive. It's oppression within that realm. So thinking about it from all the different lenses is important, and equity also means finance.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you've made a valid point in bringing that to the forefront, because again, there's not much discussion about it. We just think everyone gets paid the same, and with our white counterparts, or with the other person who maybe even identify as being disabled. So like, we need to enact some equity. Well, not some. We need to enact equity when it comes to leveling that playing field. We talk about the gender pay gap. We talk about the ethnicity pay gap, where there is a pay gap in each underrepresented community.
Yeah, definitely.
How do we address that? And especially when we have consultants in the D&I space doing the work and still not being equitable, that is so contradictory to me. But that's a discussion for another day. That's a discussion on its own. But I guess my final thing that I want you to leave with our audience is, yes, we talked about some of the challenges, some of the learnings that we've had and our experience within the D&I space, but what is one thing that you love about being in D&I space?
I think the genuine connection. And that means with different people in different spaces, from different identities, and kind of just different people with different perspectives. And I think building that connection and having, I guess, creating that psychological safety to have those conversations and also take people through an experience. And I think I always think about the body as well. A lot of the conversations is cognitive, and actually not everyone processes things from just a cognitive lens. So I think the body and the kind of movement, the experience aspects of this work is so important. So I think for me, it's just a connection that I've built, the trust that I've built with people to really open up about their stories, open up about the challenges, the things that they've experienced, and actually the people leaning in and saying, actually, I'm experiencing this thing. What do you think? And yeah, like I've just met you 2 hours ago, but to have that level of trust, it says a lot. So I don't take that lightly. I don't take any kind of disclosures or people telling me stories lightly. I think it's an honor to be that person that can hold someone in those spaces. And yeah, and I think it's just who I am. I hold people, so it's also what I bring in the space, the kind of the psychological safety and building connection and some fun. Like we have to also balance in fun,
Yeah. I think people, like, let's not forget, being in the D&I space is really fun. Like the people that you meet, the different cultures that you engage with. For me, I think the one thing that I love about being in this space is that I get to learn from so many people. It has literally opened my world to a whole cohort of new people that I perhaps wouldn't have known before. And then for me also, it's given me that pride to know that, like, I can be someone to wield the change. It's given me it's a big responsibility. It really, really is. But for me, I take, like you said, I don't take that lightly, and I'm honored to be in the position where I can. But it allows me to be in a space where I can lift people up. And seeing people from for me, like one of my key areas within D&I is women empowerment, Black people, specifically Black Caribbean. I'm going to be very specific. But people from those communities, I feel honored that I can bring them and help them get to from A to B because of some of the things that I do, and seeing them journey, like you said, journey with you and go through that experience with you. It's one of the most wonderful and rewarding feelings, being able to tell a brethren and be like, come on, let's go. We got work to do. I didn't get here for you to just lay back and do nothing. Come on. So for me, it's bringing people on that journey, and being in a space, it has allowed me to do that. So I totally agree with you on that. And here's to more power. Here's to integrity. Growth.
Definitely. Integrity is a massive one. Yes, integrity all day. Yeah. That's one of my core values as a person, as a human.
And that's one of our values here at Cohesia Connect. So that is for us, it's all about integrity, respect, and, sustainable change. That's what we want. We don't want this change to take a dip. We want it to be sustainable throughout generations to come. So no, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy that you could have made it. I know you literally just traveled to America and you were just like, yeah, I'm still going to do it. And I'm just like, you sure?
It's important. And I'm in Minnesota. So just context, I'm actually in Minnesota, not that far away from where George Floyd was killed. So this is, it's context. We were driving past it yesterday and I was like, wow, okay. Just physically being in the space, in the arena. And that's one of many, police brutality anyway. Yeah.
But no, I'm so thrilled that you could still join me after a 10-hour journey and settling in only a couple of days. So you're doing very well, shall I say?
Thank you. It's been beautiful to be here. So just genuine thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone that's listening to this or will listen to this in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Milka, for joining us. And once again, to our audience, thank you for chiming in. I hope you found this conversation very interesting. I really enjoyed this conversation in order for us to be open and honest about some of the things that perhaps happen behind closed doors or our own experiences in being in the D&I space. So hopefully it's given you a bit of a taster, and hopefully you've taken something away, you've learned something, you're going to pick up something that you can then go on and change. Whatever it is, we hope you feel empowered. So thank you all for listening, and we hope to see you all soon on our next podcast. So look out for that. Thank you. Bye, Milka.
Bye.